Do you ever feel like you and your partner are like speaking two different languages, or like maybe you're just looking for ways to deepen that bond you already have? Whatever stage your relationship is in, today in part 2, we're going to talk about transforming good intentions into great connections. From mastering the art of communication to making the most of every moment together, we're unlocking those secrets done in couples therapy to a stronger, more fulfilling partnership. So get ready to turn love into an action verb right here, right now. Welcome back for part 2 of episode 3 in Mindful Chatting, and where we dive deep into making your personal and relationships health thrive. I'm Kristin, and today we're continuing our journey into strengthening relationships. In the second part of this series, we're going to uncover everyday strategies that can dramatically improve how you connect and communicate with your partner. So, are you ready to transform your relationship? Let's dive in. So before we began, this part 1 of this series was about couples therapy and what couples therapy actually does for you and your relationship. If you haven't listened to that episode or of part 1, I would highly recommend it, because we're going to be going into the strategies that is done within couples therapy and what that actually looks like for you guys. And I think part 1 really just talks about why we need to work on this stuff and why it's important. But going into part 2, we're going to focus first on effective communication. So again, communication is more than just exchanging information. It's really about understanding your partner's perspective and how they're feeling and their experience with what they're going through. And we talked a little bit about I statements in part 1. I would highly suggest you going to the link in the description to the blog, because I have an infographic of like how to use I statements that's free that can help you work with your partner. So that's something that you can do today, right now. You can print that out or have it on your phone, and you and your partner can sit there and practice I statements. And I statements really frame your concerns about your perspective without blaming your partner. But again, using I statements correctly is better than saying like, you do this, you do that. I don't like it when. We have to say, I feel neglected. I feel unheard when I don't get a text from you today. You never, and instead of saying like, you never text me, because when you hear you never text me, like, you're going to get super defensive. You're going to be like, well, yeah, I do text you. And then we're not actually talking about the feeling, the neglection. We feel that your partner feels neglected. Now we're just getting defensive about the fact, well, I need to prove to you that I do text you. And what that does is it invalidates your partner's perspective, their experience of what they're going through. So you have so I feel neglected when. So I always tell partners to focus on the observation of the behavior instead of saying you. So we never want to start with you. So I feel neglected when I don't receive a text from you most of the day. You try to be very specific and clarify, like, or I feel neglected when I don't get a text from you while you're at work. I need is the end of that I feel statement that everybody always forgets about, which I think is actually the most important. But I need isn't always following up with, I need you to text me while you're at work. The need is actually referencing the neglect. So I need this in order to feel not neglected anymore. So I feel neglected when you don't text me when you're at work. I need to know that you care about me, or I need to feel like you think about me, or that I'm considered. That's actually the need. And then the conversation can be about the need and not so much about the texting, because like I said in part 1, couples therapy really uncovers that it's not just about the dishes, that it's not just about the texting. There's always something different about or deeper about it that we're trying to uncover. But this is something that you can start right away with practicing. And again, I talk about this in part 1 about, You don't practice it when conflict's happening. You practice it when things are going well because it's a lot easier to actually practice it. We give each other more grace because we're not fired up and emotional. And we can talk to our partner about how we want to be communicated with and to so that it actually is effective when conflicts and problems arise. Active listening. So, active listening is actually really challenging, and I talk a little bit more about it in part one. But something that you can start right today when it comes to active listening is echoing what the person is saying. So, let's just take the previous example of like, I feel neglected when you don't text me at work. And if I were to have another partner in front of me, I would go, okay, stop. Now, what did you hear? And then that partner may go, they want me to text them all day. And it's like, well, no, you skipped the major part of what your partner was saying was that they feel neglected. So then I'll have them really repeat back, my partner feels neglected when I don't text them. And then, in couples therapy, we would go like, well, how does that make you feel? What's going on for you when you hear about that? But you guys can start echoing back each other to really actually see, did my partner hear what I just communicated with them? And then this helps like prevent misunderstandings and actually can deepen your guys' connection. But you can start doing that right now. This also leads into like validating your emotions too. Because if I hear my partners say that they know I feel neglected, sometimes that's going to make me feel heard. Now, did they understand? I don't know. We're going to have to dive into a discussion a little bit more about that. But if I hear my emotions echoed back to me, it validates the fact that my partner knows how I feel. And I think that gets lost in communication. And I think why validation is so important is because it makes us feel safe. It makes us feel like we're supported. And then I'm going to be more likely to share my thoughts and emotions with you later. And so that's something that you guys can start right away today when it comes to working on communication. Something else that you can start with today is quality time. I know in the hustle of like everyday life, carving out quality time together is actually really, really hard. But this doesn't always mean that they're big, grand date nights. It's actually the small things that really matter when we're talking about quality time. Not that I don't think scheduling date nights is super important, but it's like what we're doing on the daily in our routine, in our habits that really actually matter more when you think about quality time. But let's go into, you can start scheduling regular date nights. So I've seen couples where like they're super busy and usually every month when we're like paying the bills, we're looking over the month and that's the time to actually schedule quality date nights because what we'll do is we'll start scheduling them like on a Thursday or like a Friday night and we want to go out tomorrow and they're like, oh, well now I got to get a babysitter or, oh no, I already have plans with Josie to do that, and then we look like we're not prioritizing our partner or our relationship when really we didn't actually make and prioritize a relationship when we were able to. It's very rare that like your whole life is planned out to the T. Usually when we're starting off a new month, like that would be a good time to go, do we have any Friday, Saturday, or whatever nights you guys are off open this month? And let's book them now. And that can look like a dinner out, a movie, but it doesn't always mean that like you have to go out, especially, couples who have kids or that are maybe not working on a budget or saving. They can look like date nights in, but it's about setting intention. So like, we're like, okay, Saturday night, we're going to hang out. Okay, cool. But then we get there and we go, well, what do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? And then that looks like inconsiderate. Like you didn't even plan a date night or are you even interested in having a date night? And so then that can bring on arguments and, feelings and hurt feelings. And so scheduling, like, even if we're staying in, what movie are we going to watch? What food are we going to make together? Are we going to watch a movie in a different room? Ooh, spicy, I know. But like something to where we're actually setting intentional time and we're scheduling it. And I know that takes the spontaneity out of it. But if we're at a point where we have to schedule time, it's better than no time together at this point. Another thing that I think really falls to the wayside is like in the beginning, usually we have shared interests, which kind of bring us together. And then, people change and our hobbies change, um, and then we don't really have a shared hobby with us anymore. We don't have those shared interests that we both like to do together. And so sometimes reigniting those things you can start today. So maybe think about some things that you guys used to do, or maybe even something you've always wanted to try, and what could we do? And again, it doesn't always have to be like something expensive that you have to go out to do, but that could be something like maybe you guys have always wanted to take a cooking class together, or maybe you've always wanted to try glass blowing or something crazy, but that could be something that like we've never done before. So let's do that. That could be a really cool hobby that we now have and share together. But you can do free things like hiking, um, or going to the park. Like it doesn't always have to include money. Or, what are some hobbies and things that we can do at home that we're, taking time and scheduling time to do them together. And this can also be brought into those scheduled date nights. Like, let's say you both like to paint, or, you can go and do like those painting by numbers. You don't have to do, become major Van Gogh artists, but you could do paint by numbers and like, okay, well, we're going to watch a movie and we're going to do a paint by numbers tonight. And that can be something that we've never done before that could add a little spice to just sitting there and watching a movie on the couch and probably eventually just falling asleep. Lastly, I like to talk about rituals, because we tend to fall into habits of our morning routines and our nightly routines. And these are really good times to actually schedule quality time that I don't think we think about. So like, if you always wake up in the morning, maybe you're waking up in the morning together. Maybe you're actually sitting at the coffee table and like having coffee or breakfast together. Or maybe, 10 to 15 minutes before bed, you actually make time to sit there and talk and, kind of strengthen that emotional connection by connecting, even if it is for 5 to 10 minutes in your day. I don't know if you've ever heard of this app called Love Nudge, but it's based off of the 5 love languages. And this Love Nudge like helps, so you both download the app and it helps you remind you to connect with your partner. I know that sounds so crazy, but again, we're connecting with our partner, but maybe we're not doing it in an emotional, meaningful way. And Love Nudge, this app on your phone, can help you connect with your partner and show affection a little bit differently. I have the link in the description if you're interested in doing something called Love Nudge. There's also Gottman card decks that you can add into your quality time. I have the link in the description for that app, where it's just a bunch of questions and different types of categories that can be really helpful and really effective with learning how to talk to each other and ask each other questions and like learn who your partner is. The next thing you guys can start doing right now is actually learning how to be vulnerable with each other. I know vulnerability is like the hardest thing, but it can strengthen a bond like nothing else. And it doesn't always have to be these super deep things when you think about vulnerability. It can actually be just sharing your hopes, your fears, your insecurities. And then this openness creates like a deeper emotional connection, which then ultimately fosters trust. If you find this challenging, and I understand that, but remember that it's a journey. So start really small and then gradually open up more as you both feel comfortable. And remember to encourage this reciprocal sharing. So we want to create a safe space. So we're not making fun of our partner, we're not teasing them. It's okay to use a little humor to release the tension of how uncomfortable it might be to be vulnerable. But remember that we're supposed to be responding with empathy and like support, because then that reinforces them to be more open and trustworthy later. But these discussions can actually bring you closer, make your relationship more robust. You guys can create goals together. And, if we're actively striving for something together, that makes me feel like I belong somewhere. That makes me feel like I'm on a team. And we have this camaraderie, and that kind of pushes the momentum of the relationship forward a lot easier. The last thing you guys can start doing right now is boundaries. And boundaries are kind of interesting because people think that boundaries separate or disconnect, and it's actually quite the opposite, especially if you're doing it appropriately and effectively. Healthy boundaries actually creates respect. It'll prevent resentment. It's a way of getting closer together, and it actually brings you closer together. And having healthy boundaries learns a way to communicate your needs more clearly. I think if you guys just start doing boundaries right now, it would be super helpful. But you basically discuss what you're comfortable with and what your limits are, and how you can manage your personal time, how you interact with family and friends. Normally, a lot of problems that sometimes happen is because we either are not setting effective boundaries or our partner is crossing our boundaries, and we just don't know how to communicate that sometimes. Honoring each other's boundaries. So when a partner is setting a boundary, we don't push against it. We don't throw a temper tantrum about it. We have to learn to respect them. We can share that I don't really like this and it makes me feel uncomfortable, but I understand why you're setting the limit, and I'm going to try my hardest to respect it. And that actually prevents that resentment and conflict later on. Also, I don't think people realize that boundaries are alive and living, and they evolve. And so a boundary that was set prior may need to be adjusted, may need some more dialogue or discussion to change, or because I don't think boundaries should be rigid. I think they should be flexible within the person who sets them. And so the more your guys' trust and your vulnerability, and as the relationship grows and improves, boundaries may need to be adjusted, or maybe that boundary allowed that vulnerability. And I think talking about that and how that boundary affects, influences your relationship is really super important. Books that I really enjoy, and one of them is The 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work. That's from John Gottman, or the Gottman Institute. This is a really helpful, insightful book. It talks about the 7 principles that the Gottmans found helped keep couples lasting over several decades. And it's based on science and not just something that they threw out. They have love labs that they've been holding for decades. And so they've taken this data and really created 7 principles that kind of make those relationships work. And I think this book can be really helpful for people who are just starting out, or even people that have been married for a really long time. There's also this other book called Boundaries. I'll have a link in the description for this one too. I do think this book really covers all the different types of boundaries: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and explains how these lines can help manage your stress and your responsibilities actually more effectively by setting boundaries. So this is more of a generic book about boundaries, but it can be applied to your relationship, and it can be super effective of learning how to communicate them clearly to your partner so that it doesn't start that resentment, and prevent that conflict that we were talking about. So we've covered a lot with part 1 and part 2 about couples counseling, from enhancing your communication to spending quality time and embracing vulnerability. It's a lot, but I hope I've given you some strategies that you can actually start with today. You don't need to have couples therapy to start any of these. Do I think couples therapy is helpful? Absolutely. But you can also practice a lot of these things that we talked about today and implement them to lead to profound change in your actual relationship. And remember, if you're looking for more structured guidance, couples counseling can be a great resource for you. But I really want to thank you for tuning in. Be sure to join us next time, and we're going to explore more ways to enrich your life and your relationship. Please note that this podcast includes affiliate links, which means I may receive a commission if you make a purchase through these links at no extra cost to you. I only recommend products I truly believe in and use myself and will actually think benefit you. Your support helps keep this podcast running. Thanks.